technology education teacher here at Wabasha High School. For those that are wondering what industrial technology education is, I'm known as a shop teacher. I also happen to be the president of Education Minnesota, Wabasha Kellogg. And a bunch of other stuff I do out in school. It's really my pleasure today to be able to introduce Congresswoman Angie who's going to be here. What I want you to all remember is that we are Minnesota nice, we're Minnesota respectful, and that her time is as valuable as all of ours, and that she really needs to keep her time schedule today. So this is going to last right around to about 1:05, and I actually, to pull this all together at the end of the hour, I'm going to get the last question. So if you all want to ask questions, you better get it in before I get mine, because the last one is mine. Okay? And I'm pretty good at running a classroom, so let's all be This is actually Congresswoman Craig's 6th town hall that she's having in She is paying attention to what her constituency wants, and that's exactly what we want with a congressperson in Washington. So it is also my pleasure today to introduce Paul Cushman. Paul is a Wabasha Kellogg grad. He is going to be singing the national anthem and another song for you today. And it is at this time I would like to introduce to you our singer, Paul Cushman, and Congresswoman Angie Craig.
Also, I'm not very good at talking, so.
times around I'm standing here inside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye, but the dawn is breaking, it's early morn. The taxi's waiting, his body's horn. Already I'm so lonesome I could die. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. 'Cause I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, you know I hate to go. There's so many times that I've let you down. So many times that you've around. I tell you now, they didn't mean a thing. I was trying to leave you one more time. Kiss you and close your eyes, and I'll be on my way. Oh, kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. 'Cause I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, you know I hate to go. Now the time has come to leave you. One more time, kiss you and close your eyes, and I'll be on my way. Dream about the days to come when I won't have to leave you alone. About the times I won't have to say, oh, kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. 'Cause I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, you know I hate to go.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you for being here with us. Now, I also understand that you may have a second talented job. Is that correct?
Maybe?
Maybe? Mark Toys?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Yes, let's call for Mark Toys. It's an honor and a privilege to welcome each of you to my 6th town hall since I was sworn in. And I always start my town halls by recognizing the veterans in the room. So if you are, especially this week, I want to say thank you for your service to this nation. So please stand if you're able, if you served our nation. Shout out to our moderator, Neil. Thank you for being here today. You are going to keep me on track. stay for the town hall, but a big shout out to Emily as well. And then I want to say hello and congratulations on your announced retirement plans to Rolf Thompson. In the back that I take every opportunity to tell every other member of Congress that I am the only one of us with the National Eagle Certificate. Java Jim and Java Jan, because they provided the coffee and stuff. Before I get going with my opening remarks, I also just want to take this moment. Many of you may have seen a clip from a House committee a couple of weeks ago, and that was a clip of John Stewart and retired Detective Lou Alvarez testifying on behalf of permanently establishing and funding the 9/11 First Responders Fund. Unfortunately, this morning, the retired detective passed away of the cancer that inflicted him as a result of his service in heroism. So I just want to take a moment of silence for him, for every single patriot who ran into that building on 9/11. And for the country, because we have to go back and permanently extend the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund, and I'm sure in Lou's honor. So just a moment. Thank you so very much. Again, thank you all for being here today. My job as a member of Congress is to represent the entirety of the 2nd Congressional District, and that is why I spent time now, as of today, holding a town hall in every single county in the 2nd Congressional District. This is the first time, though, since I was elected, that I've been back to Wabasha County. I had probably one of the most monumental events of the entire time I've served in Congress, actually in Wabasha a couple months ago, I guess now, where we brought together folks from all kinds of stakeholders in the mental health environment and industry, because we wanted to hear how we can solve mental health issues in greater Minnesota and rural America. And this is very poignant for me right now, as family farms and family farmers have faced the struggles of just wanting a fair price and open markets and the ability to conduct trade in this country. And so it was an extraordinary event with a number of stakeholders. I also want to shout out to St. Elizabeth's, just an incredible both employer and provider of health care here in the 2nd Congressional District in Wabasha County. And I am also on the Water Resources Committee of the U.S. House on Transportation and Infrastructure. So I get the opportunity often to talk about our Army Corps of Engineers, to talk about the waterways and the resources that we need to bring to them. And I know for many of you here, commodities are just now, or just recently, on the Mississippi River as a result of the excessive flooding and rain that we have in this district. So these supply chain disruptions are a disruption to each of our communities that are on the beautiful riverways, and of course they're an economic disruption to the country. So I just want to remind everybody that the purpose of the district staff of a member of Congress is to help its constituents deal with issues that you may be having. I'd like to ask my staff, those of you who are here, to stand, if you would, please. Oh, great. Most of them are already standing. Great. I want to tell you just 2 or 3 stories real quick about what they've been able to accomplish. I think I told you last time that a 96-year-old veteran came to us with some past Veterans Administration benefits that he was owed, and we were able to work with the federal government, navigate the red tape, and get those dollars to him. A man from Lakeville recently came to us saying that Medicare wasn't helping him pay for his prescriptions, and he had already paid his deductible. And so we worked again with the federal government to make sure that what he earned in deserved was paid to him. My team is currently working with a veteran in the district to get him the medals he earned but never received. And we've also helped several folks in the district apply to have their student debt waived due to their disabilities for the time being. So these are the types of things that a congressional district office can help you with. And I'm outlining them just because if you've got neighbors who are in need in any of these areas, tell them to call our district office. We would be happy to work to help them. So I want to just lay out the numbers, and then we'll move right into Q&A here this morning. So far, we have held 12 mobile office hours since I've been elected. We have responded to 17,611 telephone calls and letters, to be specific. I've introduced 13 bills and amendments in the U.S. House of Representatives. I've co-sponsored 194 bills, 77% of which are bipartisan. 22 of the bills that I've co-sponsored have now passed the House floor, and all but one, H.R. 1, which is sweeping democracy protections and campaign finance reform, has received bipartisan support. And I will tell you that I am going to quote Rolf Thompson, who is quoting Preston Cook now. But since we are in the National Eagle Center, I would like to just say that the quote from him is absolutely right. An eagle requires a left and a right wing to fly. So some of the legislation that I'd highlight to you, of course, is H.R. 1. I've talked about that before, that if we really want to control special interests in Washington, we are going to have to pass campaign finance reform. We have passed a bill called the Strengthening Healthcare and Lowering Prescription Drug Prices. And when I talk to folks around this congressional district, the number one issue they raise to me is how are we going to make health insurance more affordable, but ultimately, how are we going to make healthcare more affordable? And to that end, this past week, I joined on to introduce a new bill in the U.S. Congress. It's called the Price Act. And it lowers the exclusivity period for biologic drugs, meaning brand name pharma is going to get competition faster from generic providers if we pass this bill. Yeah. This is one way we can increase competition and put pressure on big pharma companies to do the right thing and start lowering the cost of prescription drugs in this country. This bill, too, would require Medicare to negotiate its drug pricing. It makes absolutely no sense that the largest healthcare purchaser in the world does not negotiate its pricing, just as it already does, the Veterans Administration already does. So that also takes care of that issue. I was also very proud on Thursday to sign on to something called Medicare X of 2019. Medicare X will allow the establishment of a public option to compete with the big insurance companies in this country. Without affecting the Medicare Trust Fund, what we're talking about is just introducing more competition, which should reduce the cost of healthcare. And it's incredibly important in areas of my district like Wabasha and Woodhue, where there is not enough competition in the individual marketplace for health insurance providers. There is not a single way in my mind to solve the issue of every single American having access to health care that they can afford. It is going to take a multiple legislation approach to this, and with that, I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of both of those bills. For this area of the district as well, I also just want to highlight a couple of other things that I've been working on. I am very happy to have passed out of the House of Representatives, H.R. 1331, the Local Water Protection Act. This provides grant dollars to local communities to fight non-point source pollution, which is incredibly important to our rivers, our streams, our wetlands, our oceans, and I was very happy to partner with Republican Brian Mast on this piece of legislation. Marco Rubio and Amy Klobuchar have introduced this bill in the Senate. So I'm very hopeful that that will get a vote and that the president will sign it into law. So very, very hopeful. The other thing that we've been working on, and we did this over a total of 5 days. I think I told you at a different town hall that, the only thing decent that came out of being sworn into Congress 12 days into a government shutdown is it caused the Republican and the Democratic freshmen to sit down together in a room. Remember, we didn't have committee assignments. We barely had offices. So the Republicans and the Democrats, we sat down together in the Ag Committee room, and we got to know each other. And we started talking about how can we change this place for the better. There were about 15 Dems and 15 Rs who did this. I'm really proud that as a result of that relationship that I developed with South Dakota Republican Dusty Johnson, that he and I introduced about 10 days ago something called the FEED Act. And the FEED Act essentially allows our farmers, because of these wet conditions, it gives the Secretary explicit authority to authorize prevent plant for personal use of haying, and you could also donate it. That way we can get cover crops on the ground this season, and farmers can still qualify for the crop insurance that they would have otherwise not been able to qualify for if they had taken before November 1st. So Dusty and I introduced this. We had 27 ag organizations endorse it in 5 days. As a result of that pressure, the administration and Secretary Perdue announced last week that they will be moving forward with that under executive authority without waiting on Congress to act. So I'm incredibly and then just 2 more things. I managed to get myself in a little bit of trouble with my own party over the last 10 days. That's okay. I introduced something called the Humble Act. The Humble Act will ban for life any member of Congress becoming a lobbyist after their service. Many of you know that 2/3 of former members of Congress become lobbyists after they represent their communities. That gives them direct access to their former colleagues and to us. They can wear their pin and walk right onto the House floor. They can walk into the House gym. They can park at House parking spots. And I've learned most of that since I've become a member of Congress by virtue of experiencing it. And so I decided to move forward to introduce the Humble Act. Lastly, again, I filed an amendment 2 weeks ago. The wrong priority for this Congress would be to give itself a pay raise. We have not lowered the cost of prescription drugs yet. We have not lowered the cost of health insurance. We haven't passed the transportation and infrastructure bill. We haven't promoted and funded career skills and technical education like the SHOP programs that Neil runs. We haven't done any of that. So why should it be a priority for members of Congress to have a pay raise? So I filed an amendment to have that stripped from an appropriations bill, and it was therefore taken out of appropriations. We'll see what happens, but at the end of the day, I don't think we've earned a pay raise, and we shouldn't get anything that we don't earn.
Here.
So again, I just want to say welcome. It is such an honor and privilege to represent this congressional district. As you all know, we're not always going to agree on everything, but my belief is that this country has better days, and I've got more optimism than some ahead. And I intend to keep showing up, keep listening, and keep working on behalf of all of my constituents. So thank you so much, and let's take it away.
Over here that we would like you to address when you have your question. Now, 1 minute to ask a question. So if you have a comment, you better make it quick. So you have 1 minute, and then Angie will answer you in 2 minutes. Okay, we want everybody to get a first chance. So if you have a follow-up question, please leave that until everyone else has had a chance to ask their question. And then remember, I'm going to be watching the time, and when it's time for Angie to move on today, I will be asking the last question. Okay?
Well, and just let me add, there is, let's do a practice run, Kaylee. Ding me. And just to be clear, this is not for you. This is so that I stick to my 2-minute response. I told her to be aggressive today, didn't you? So we'll get to as many questions as we can with the deer. So if you have a question, just simply line up behind the microphone, and we'll start addressing your questions.
Yeah, I'll pick this up. As part of an omnibus bill, there we go. Yeah, it's on good on the microphone.
You sound great.
Part of an omnibus bill this year was that national popular vote proposal. Whatever happened to that?
The national popular vote proposal.
Right.
That hasn't been brought to us on the House floor.
It was part of an omnibus bill. I don't remember which omnibus bill it was, but I recall.
Let me ask my team to go back and look at that. Those omnibus bills contain a whole lot of provisions, but Nick, let's make sure that, what was your name, sir?
Dennis.
Dennis. Let's make sure that we're able to get back to Dennis real quick on that, if you would. Nick Coe is my district director. Thank you.
Hi, Congresswoman. I'm Paul from Egan, and some people have said we've got a housing crisis. It's actually something that people end up paying like well more than 1/3 of their income for rent or shelter sometimes. Do you have any kind of an idea about the possibility of something like renter's credit or some other kind of way to look at that?
Well, I think obviously the affordable housing is the biggest issue in a lot of our communities. I'm Angie from Egan too. Egan has identified affordable housing as the #1 issue, and I know Red Wing in particular has a housing shortage and housing crisis. I think there are a number of units under development right now. Right now, I think the idea that we're going to get more TIFs inside each of our local communities and be able to accelerate the development of those units, but each local community has got to be able to decide for itself. But it is a real crisis. We've got, over 160,000 job openings in Minnesota. We've got about 0.6 applicants for each of those job openings, and much of that is due to the fact that if you've got a job at Red Wing Shoes and you can't find a place to live and there's a 9-month wait for childcare, you're not going to be able to grow the economy in that community. So we need to continue to look for those policy solutions, Paul, and support our local communities.
Thank you. I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, I'm Siri Everett. I'm from Red Wing, and I remember at one of your previous town halls talking about a bill you had worked on with Pete Stauber for special education. Could you speak to kind of how things are going with that and any updates?
Well, the update I'll start with is that we challenged each other recently to see who could get the most co-sponsors on the bill. Pete and I are working together. We actually didn't know each other before we were both elected to Congress. Pete represents Minnesota's 8th congressional district. I, of course, the 2nd. And we sat down on a train at new member orientation right after we were both sworn in and talked about the things that we care about. And we found out that we both had special needs kids, one each, and that this was an area, full funding of IDEA, that we were both very passionate about. So where that bill is it's growing in co-sponsors. We challenged each other to a beer recently to see who could get the most co-sponsors. And when I announced the winner, I said it doesn't matter because Minnesota wins if we fully fund special education. And I am really proud. So that bill's working its way through. It would fully fund special education up to 40%, just like the federal government promised, over about 10 years. So it's not overnight. We're trying to be fiscally responsible while we think about it. But I will tell you, the appropriations bill that we just passed, the U.S. Congress, had the largest increase in appropriations for IDEA funding in a decade. It was over $1 billion more. And at the end of the day, look, this job funding is about choices. And we send our tax dollars to Washington. We ought to get the money back from Washington in the form of federal funding for IDEA. Because if we don't, what ends up happening is the community comes back to you and asks you for an operating levy. And that's after our teachers have been asked to take on increased class sizes. So this is a real problem for our entire communities, and I'm very happy to be partnering with Pete.
Congresswoman Craig, thank you for this event. I'm quite impressed with this turnout, and also the accommodations of your staff to make sure there's plenty of seating. I hope to see a bigger line behind me. Now, as a candidate, you registered for the office, you were vetted, and you became an endorsed candidate. How can we in the future change the process so that we have less opportunities and less problems with certain candidates like Omar right now, that slows down and bogs down the legislative process?
Well, you know what I learned a long time ago is that I should answer for myself and not talk about other members of Congress except on policy disagreements. So, I was elected as the representative of the 2nd Congressional District by the people of this district. Other districts elect their candidates as well. So for me, it's about how do I stay focused on the things that this district is asking me to focus on. What I hear when I talk to constituents is go fight to lower the cost of prescription drugs, go fight to lower the cost of health care, go fight for transportation and infrastructure funding, for career skills, technical education, for our family farmers, for rural broadband, go fight for those things. And there's a whole lot that can distract you in Washington. And I purposely have stopped watching MSNBC and some of the other news programs because, look, at the end of the day, my only focus should be on what matters in the 2nd Congressional District, and that's what I've decided will be my focus as a member of Congress. Thank you for your time.
Any opportunity to change the process?
To change the electoral process?
The electoral process to allow people to become registered and vetted and endorsed. Let's just call it background checks.
Well, the state sets the endorsement process up. Each party sets its endorsement process up, and then of course there is a primary system after that process has been put in place. So we have to change how we select candidates at the state level if you want to change the process. But I appreciate you being here and asking the question. Thank you.
I just have a generic question that perhaps a few other people in the room have. I just like your assessment of the likelihood that we could be rid of this president before the next election.
Well, look, what I will say to you is, again, I am a member of Congress focused on the issues that my district wants me to focus on. I have been very clear that a foreign entity interfered with American democracy.
Yes.
And we have to understand the details of that, and we have to make sure it never happens again, no matter who is interfering on whose behalf. This could happen to any political party. Right? So we have to stay objective. Let's fill in the details and the facts. That is what I have said from day one. We all need to understand exactly what the Mueller investigation determined with respect to a foreign government interfering with a U.S. election. That is my democratic oath, and that is the principle that I support. And at the end of the day, we have to let the facts speak for themselves and move forward. And the other thing that I'm going to tell you, though, is we have to do our constitutional duty for oversight. At the same time, we don't have the luxury of waiting for the American people. I've got people in this district who are type 1 diabetics who literally are rationing their insulin. They're going to Canada. They're trying to find a way to just stay alive. People are tired of their grocery bill going up, their prescription drug costs going up, but their paycheck not going up. So we've got to be able to do what is constitutionally required of us, and at the same time, keep our eye on what is really important in my district, which is what folks talk to me about all the time.
Congresswoman Craig, Tristan English from Red Wing. I'm a leader of a faith community there, Christ Episcopal Church, and I'm also part of a group called Friends of Immigrants. Both of those groups have a concern about the crisis at the border right now, specifically around the detainment of children and the conditions in which they're being detained. A lot of that's also being done through these private detention centers and not so much federal detention centers. But can you talk about what Congress can do in regards to that, and maybe within, I know 2 minutes, but also the scare or the fear that our Hispanic brothers and sisters have right now around the impending ICE raids that are alluded to as whether or not they will happen.
Thank you, Tristan, and thank you for your service to our community. Let me just say that we have a humanitarian crisis at this border. We have a humanitarian crisis. And as you well know, the Congress on Friday took a tough vote. It was a very hard decision to make because the Senate bill that got presented to us for emergency assistance at the border was not a perfect bill. I like the House version better, but we cannot let perfect be the enemy of good. We needed to get the assistance down to the border. And I was not prepared to come home and stand in front of my constituents and say that, hey, we sent an amendment to the Senate, maybe they'll get back to it in a week and send additional support down to the border. So I made a tough decision on Friday to support the bipartisan bill that came out of the Senate. Look, the problem, Tristan, as you know, is immigration has become a political talking point instead of a thoughtful policy discussion. We need to protect our borders. There is no doubt about that. But we also need to invest in our ports of entry to keep drugs out. We need to make sure that asylum seekers who are legally seeking entry into this country have enough immigration judges so that they are not detained in these camps. When I come home and talk to our employers, when I talk to our farmers, what they tell me is that we need comprehensive immigration reform because we need a legal blue card to allow ag workers to come here and help us get the apples out of the orchard. We need to establish a path to citizenship for our dreamers, those kids who were brought here of no volition of their own, who grew up in our schools, they're our neighbors. We need to make this more than political talking points. This is not easy, but we can do both. I can stop talking, but we can do both. We can do both. We can protect our borders and we can reform this immigration system.
Hi, I'm Deborah from Lake City. And being a member of the Ag Committee, the question that I have is where is the USMCA at? And when is that going to move forward?
You're welcome, and thank you so much for being here. So USMCA is the NAFTA 2.0. That's what it is. So NAFTA 2.0, or USMCA, is going to offer a little bit of economic opportunity for the ag sector. Overall, it is an improvement over NAFTA. Where we are, though, is a little challenging because the draft USMCA was sent to the Congress in direct violation of agreement that the speaker had made with Ambassador Lighthizer. This agreement has two provisions that I believe will be problematic for it being brought forward to the U.S. Congress. And so where I am is I'm trying to get to yes on USMCA, but it's got to have two changes, I think, to pass the U.S. Congress. It has got to have an amendment for a biologics provision. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And it's got to have stronger enforcement provisions for labor in Mexico. It has got to have strong labor enforcement provisions, and right now they aren't strong enough. The biologics issue is incredibly problematic to me. Pharmaceutical companies are not even in the original NAFTA, but they have managed to insert themselves into the new trade agreement and raise the marketing exclusivity period for brand name drugs in Mexico and Canada. Well, why would the U.S. want to do that? Because brand name pharma wants that to happen. Why does brand name pharma want that to happen? Because we're talking about allowing re-importation of drugs from Canada. So brand name pharma is trying to drive up prices in Canada and Mexico so they can keep prices high in America and prevent the Congress from reducing this marketing exclusivity period. At the end of the day, what I've said to Ambassador Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, don't make me choose for my farmers between their health care and their markets. Don't make me make that choice. So I hope the administration comes forward with an amendment very soon that would allow us to say yes to that agreement.
I'm Representative Craig. It's good to see you again. My name is Greg, and I'm a constituent from Lakeville. I'm also a proud kid from a small town up north that at some point in his life, after wallowing in college and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, ended up in the metro and was fortunate enough to end up in a trades apprenticeship, which worked out fairly well for me. But what can the federal government do? What can be their role in helping kids like me that never really wanted to leave their hometowns, never really thought that college was the right place? What's the role of the federal government? What can they do to help kids like me?
Wow, that is a great question, and one that probably, Greg, doesn't have a single policy solution to it. But let me talk about perhaps a couple. I've got a son who reminds me of you. My son, Josh, is my oldest, and college, to him just never seemed quite like the right fit. He was our kid who took, the engine apart in the driveway on his old truck every afternoon when he got home from school. Sometimes he could put it back together. But as Josh was looking at his next steps, he realized that trade school was the right fit for him. He loved working with his hands. So he got himself in a program, and he's now a CNC operator in a manufacturing plant. He had 3 job offers before he was finished with his technical degree. So one of the things that I'm working on as a member of Congress is a bill that will promote more trade and technical schools in this country. Because I believe this is a critical part to how we build a workforce of the future. But the truth is, it's not just the programs we've got to change. We've got to change the way America thinks about post-secondary education. We've got to change that. Because when our kids go to high school and they're told, you gotta take the ACT. Well, why? Why do you gotta take it? If I'm not going to college, if that's not my choice, why do I need to take it? At the end of the day, we need to rethink post-secondary education. We need to make sure that our students know what all of their options are. And we need parents. We need parents to change too. We need them to understand and to promote and be proud of the career choices that every student makes, and understand that not every kid needs to go to a 4-year university to be successful. And so that is something that we're working on right now from my team's perspective.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman. My name is Leah, and I'm from Cannon Falls. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about the economy, specifically the fact that we have record low unemployment. Corporations and Wall Street and stock market doing great.
workers' wages have remained stagnant for nearly a generation. And we've got a lot of people who would like to see more return for the hard work that they do.
Well, I absolutely, thank you for being here, Leah. And, you know, my vision of the economy is that we build an economy that works for the middle class. And that is not what we're doing in this country today. We built an economy that is slanted toward the top 5% in this country. And the biggest evidence of that is the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed in 2017. That wasn't a massive tax decrease for the middle class. It was a very big giveaway to large corporations and the top 5% of this country. And you're exactly right. Unemployment is 3.2% in Wabasha. It's 2.8% in Dakota County. So unemployment has remained low, but wages have not kept pace with inflation over the last several years. And at the same time, your grocery bill's gone up. Your deductibles have gone up. Your premiums have gone up. The price you're paying when you pick up your medications have gone up. So people don't feel like, even though they're working, that this country is working for them. So to me, it's about taking a look at a middle-class tax cut. How do we get back to making sure that corporations are paying their fair share of this economy? And we are seeing signs of slow growth. We are seeing signs of slow growth. And I worry about the $22 trillion debt. I worry about America's next move should a recession or a depression come again, because we have taken away, by reducing corporate taxes all the way down to 21% in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we've taken away some flexibility. And I was a big proponent of tax cuts for the middle class and actually repatriation of foreign income for corporations when I ran for Congress. And I still believe the repatriation was the right thing to do, an element of corporate tax reform. But at the end of the day, we need to focus back on the middle class.
Hi, Angie from Wabasha. I'm the chair of the Wabasha County DFL. One of the things that concerned me over this last presidential debate week was I expected the Democratic Party to come on stronger with environmental messaging. And so I'm wondering if you see, because I think it's a 3-alarm fire, hello, let's get moving. Do you see any trends among you and your colleagues about addressing the larger picture in this area?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I did ask this question a lot in my office in Washington when I'm there. And look, there are many, many ways that we should be addressing this. And I do believe we should aggressively address climate change. When we think about the extreme weather that has been affecting the country in the Midwest here in the last several months and several years, it is a huge economic cost to us. So if we don't address climate change, we are going to end up paying for it on the end of reduction of economic growth. I supported, and it passed the House, a return to the national standards the U.S. set as part of the Paris Climate Agreement. But I think that is just a start. We have a select committee on climate change that is meeting right now. We expect a number of recommendations to come out of it. But personally, the legislative proposal that is bipartisan, that I think is really interesting, is something called the Carbon Innovation and Dividend Act. It's sponsored by Representative Ted Deutsch of Florida, and basically it puts a price on polluters, on the carbon that they're emitting, and at the same time it's not a regressive tax because the money doesn't go to the U.S. Treasury, it goes back to American households in the form of a dividend, thereby offsetting any rising energy costs as a result. But the bottom line is, if America doesn't understand that clean energy is the next evolution, it is the next revolution of post-industrial development revolution, it is the next revolution, and be a leader, I can promise you that our biggest competitor, China, will. And we have to be a leader if we want those jobs, if we want that economic development and growth, and if we want to stem the tide of the economic loss as a result of extreme weather.
Hello, Angie. Dave Fisk, Wabasha businessman. First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming to Wabasha. Really appreciate it. We are a conservative community, very proud of our heritage, but we're also proud that as a community, we gave 57% of our votes to you. So,
Thank you for that.
We're also a community that works grassroots. This is just like to throw in a commercial here. The Eagle Center doesn't have to be here. That's only here because local people got ideas, pursued the idea, and then we're joined by people across the nation to help us see it in reality. So things can happen right here on Main Street that can have national implications a few years later. I think that's important. Another thing you mentioned, the green energy. We're very proud that our city government, our county government, and our school system.
I yield 30 seconds of my
Thank you. We're very proud that our city government, county government, and school system is on the verge of being totally green energy. Probably a decade ahead of just about any place else. So we're very proud of that. My last comment is totally unrelated to that. And we all know how much it hurts when a foreign government comes in and starts meddling with our democracy. We're in that situation today. But I only ask you to be aware that we have done that around the world for many, many years. And I would like it, whatever you can do from your purse, to make sure that we stop doing that elsewhere, just like we must demand that others stop doing it. Thanks.
Hello again, it's good to see you. My name is Jean Foreman. I'm a constituent from Burnsville, Minnesota. I'm a registered nurse. I work at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, Minneapolis. I'm a very, very proud union member, Minnesota Nurses Association. We are one vote away at Minnesota Hospital from settling 6 metro contracts in the Twin Cities for nurses across that area, and those gains in negotiation and hopefully trickle back to all sorts of nurses and other healthcare providers in our state. So I just want to say that. I also want to, for the other gentleman, acknowledge my husband, Jim, who is a vocational school graduate from way back in the day, attended for free, trained in marine and small engine repair, and did a marvelous job of supporting our family for all these years. So. Is about the NLRB, and I did contact the office recently about a ruling or an executive reversal of the ability of union staff to organize in places of employment. Again, we wouldn't be able to have our contracts that we have now if it wasn't for our union supplying staff into the organization to help us do outreach to nurses, in my case, but to union members. So I'm hoping you can work with me or give me an idea what I can do to support labor and organization. I know you support the PRO Act, so that's my question and comment. So thank you, Angie.
Thank you. So we'll be happy to look in more detail, but my answer was going to be I am supporting the PRO Act. That is the right to organize and collectively bargain across this country is an absolute right. Minnesota are seeing a number of other states take Minnesota companies because they are passing right to work for less laws in their own state. Right to work sounds real good, doesn't it, when you say it out loud, but I always add the for less part because they're using those laws, those state laws to recruit our workers and our companies. So to recruit our companies and leave our workers here unemployed. So you bet, and let's look specifically into the issue that you raised at a district level. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Charlie Fishman. I'm going into my junior year at Wabasha High School. I've lived here my whole life. And so I have 5 other siblings, and all of us plan on going to college, and sometimes 4-year schools can cost upwards of $40,000. And I've been planning, and I've been looking at some schools, and I just don't see how I'm going to be able to afford that, especially when all my other siblings go into college, since we have 2 sets of twins in my family that are 1 year apart. So what can Congress do to make 4-year schools more affordable?
Thank you so much. You also invest in shirt contests. Look, this is a serious issue that is holding back our country, and it's an issue for young folks, but it's also an issue for growing our economy, right? How many kids, because of the burden of student loan, are putting off the first car, the first house, the first kid? I've talked to students in our district who are telling me those stories. So, the fixes or the help, that from an appropriations point of view we can think about is increasing the number of Pell Grants that are available to you. But I think we should go further than that. I am an advocate for 2-year post-secondary after high school. What does that mean? That doesn't mean college for everybody. That means post-secondary. After your senior year, you have 2 years to go to a trade school, to a technical education school, to do a 2-year apprenticeship in a labor organization or a union that provides you a good paying job that you can support your family, or you can spend 2 years at a state university. So to me, if we reduce that by 2 years, that would be a huge start. The other thing, but we cannot send the program to 4-year colleges. We cannot do it, not if we're doing the right thing for our economy. The second part of this is you should not pay a higher interest rate for your student loan than we pay on our houses. It makes no sense. So I believe, especially with the private sector and private banks, we ought to make sure that there is a cap on interest rates. So those are 2 specific things that we should think about that would help us reform our entire education system. And I would say, my philosophy is simple. You ought to be able to get the education you need to earn a good life, the opportunity to earn, meaning you got to work for it. I'm not going to give it to you, but you got to earn it. But if you're willing to earn it, the opportunity to earn a good life where you want to live. And that means rural America, greater Minnesota too. And there's some things we need to do to solve this issue. Affordable housing, access to opportunity and jobs. Something as simple as broadband, high-speed internet. Do you know that almost 20% of family farms in Minnesota too still yet don't have access to high-speed internet? The USDA just released those stats this week. And you think about that. How can you do precision agriculture if you don't have access to high-speed internet? It makes no sense whatsoever. You should have dinged me on that one, Kayla. She turned the timer off, and then I started. Yes, sir. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Hi, Margot Rainwater from Lake City, Minnesota. He kind of took my thunder away. I'm a lifelong educator, presently working for the Department of Corrections in the education field, and so it's been quite the eye-opener working in that area. But I do want to say that I'm living this nightmare right now because in Lake City, there are quite a few people who come from family of immigrants that they want to break the generation gap. They want to be the first ones to go to college, and I'm working with this young man right now. I'm working with him for months to get his FAFSA, to get his parents educated on this is what college does, don't be afraid of it. And then they have that meeting with the finance officer who actually gives them that punch in the stomach. This is how much it's going to cost. He even though this young man who is first generation immigrant, he got a scholarship to go to school. No, he got a scholarship to go to school, and he still, you know, is fighting to get there, and I'm trying to encourage them to do that. So I know you answered this with much thoroughness, but I just want to bring the reality of it. Not only does this young man with a huge family have this burden, but we also have our immigrant families who are trying to break that cycle, and they really want to make a better life here. And so whatever you can do for us in Congress, however you can help this younger generation to pass the torch, it would be fantastic. Okay, thank you, Angie.
You didn't ask the question, but I want to answer your comment with just a story. My mom was raising 3 kids by the time I was 7 years old, all by herself. And my mom wanted to finish her college degree, but she needed to continue to go to school to do it. And so my mom was in several junior colleges and community colleges, and it took her 9 years to get her college degree and finally become a teacher. That was what she wanted. That was the career that she wanted. My mom is still a teacher today. She's 67, and if I get it wrong, she's probably watching. But she just had a birthday, and I'm so proud because all 3 of us who were raised in that household by a single mom, we too went to college. And we had to work 2 jobs. We had to pay for it with the help of some student loans. And I am so grateful for the opportunity that coming from my family that I've had, the opportunities. But at the end of the day, 30 years ago, you could do that in this country. So it is real easy for us to say, well, look at these kids. I mean, I got 4 kids. I know. Someday I look at them and I say, oh my God, look at these kids. But these kids are facing $17,000 for tuition only. Where are they going to live? What are they going to eat? This is a real problem in our communities, and we've got to tackle it in kind of all the ways that I just talked about. But we also have to understand that in the old days, states subsidized those state schools a lot more than they do today. And so the cost of college keeps going up for young people, and it is a real challenge, and it's going to take, again, a lot of thoughtful policy solutions.
My name is Tom. I'm from Lake City, and it was overjoying last November when you won the election. I'm going to take a different approach on the student loan issue. I hear it as a big discussion at the debates. It's in the newspaper about forgiveness. I understand what everyone said beforehand. I went to school in California where tuition non-existent in the 60s and 70s. But convince me that it's my responsibility to forgive student loans today.
So that's not my policy position. I haven't advocated for that. I think we need to take a look at the interest rates those students are paying, and perhaps we need to make sure that they are not paying interest rates higher than, pick a benchmark, plus inflation. So I have not advocated for that. You're going to hear a lot of stuff in the next year plus coming out of all kinds of candidates. And I will not be aligned with every single policy proposal. In fact, if you listen to them, they're not all aligned. So this district, I think we can address this issue in the ways that I've discussed. But at the end of the day, and I'm going to be blunt here, when I hear, and I know a number of people in the room probably support candidates who say this, when I hear free 4-year college, you know what I hear? That every kid needs to go to college.
Not right.
So I think we need to be careful about thinking that, that we're going to be able to just change it. It's all going to be free. It's all going to be affordable. I think it's going to be a lot more complicated than that. And I don't support that policy. So thank you for asking it.
I'm letting roll it,
Oh,
and that'll
roll
be
it.
it. I get the last one.
All right.
There's some tall people in this area. Congressman, great, thank you for coming to Wabasha. I'd like to echo that from others who said, I believe that a legislator should be visible and available. And I believe your being here is partially taking care of those tests. My question has to do with myself, my brother, my sister, people in this room, and the 2nd District. If the proposed tariffs go through, what's the picture in your mind how we will be affected?
Thank you. Thank you, Roland. And thank you for your service to this community and for your willingness I'll say about Roland is he always tells you what he thinks, that's for sure. I think that if the proposed tariffs go through, and I know there was supposedly a little bit was close to $26,000 last year. If we don't have those markets, and I believe that to a certain degree it may be too late in China, because China is now sourcing its soybeans from Brazil. And once you lose those markets, it is incredibly difficult to get them back. Incredibly difficult to get them back. Now, I say all that, Roland, and I'll add to it, China's an offender of intellectual property. China is an offender. And so I don't disagree with the administration that something needs to be done about China. I just disagree with the strategy and tactics that a trade war that was supposed to end, be this long, which is now approaching a year long, is the best way to go about it. We let China into the WTO. There were other ways that we could address China in this issue. And I'm someone who spent over 20 years working in the private sector. We did business in China. I know they can be intellectual property thieves firsthand from that work experience. And so we need to address it, but we need to have a strategy. And we need to make sure that there are people in the room when we're tweeting.
Before I ask my last question for this program, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for making my job very easy. Thank you very much. I'm a little old school, Angie, so I want to just take you back. Back when I was a kid and selling night crawlers at the resort in northern Minnesota for 25 cents a dozen, I used to be able to take my night crawler money and take it to the bank in Deer River and get 5.25% on it. Now we hear all the time that, Americans are not saving at the level they should and all of that. And I grant that to you that there are other methods of saving. However, if we really want to teach our kids how to save and start at a very young age, is there any way we can adjust the banking rules to give the banks the opportunity to give people as much as 5.25%, again, like we got back in the 60s, so we can teach kids about saving money so that when they get to be senior citizens like me, they have something to fall back on, and that's my question.
Yeah, it is a serious issue. The idea that the average American doesn't have $400 in a bank account to be able to cover an emergency situation. There are a lot of policy discussions. I was just in a meeting last week with a number of my colleagues who were talking about, how do we start people off by opting out instead of opting in to their retirement account? How do we make sure that when folks are coming up, that they start off with, something in the bank account, whether that's the form of a bond. I know Melvin Carter's trying some really innovative things in the city of St. Paul right now. It's a complicated question of how do you encourage saving in this country. And look, the bottom line is, I can tell you that if you're with labor in this room, you have a safety net because you've been able to have a pension. Americans, if you look at the history of the labor movement, wages started declining and retirement started declining when we started to attack organized labor in the country. And so we have to, I believe, if we want to address this, look at innovative ways to address it, but also we have to look at what are we doing to strengthen organized labor. I've kept you 10 minutes over on a beautiful day. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here and participating in our democracy. I know for me, when I get on a plane and fly to Washington, I take your questions, your stories, your thoughts, your feedback back with me every week. And often I sit down with my legislative team and then I write a bill that reflects our values. We are not all going to ever agree on everything. You know, in this country, that is the beauty of democracy, that we all have an equal voice in it. We need to make sure that we continue to all have an equal voice. That's why I support, and I'm going to end by asking each of you, if you agree with me, if you don't, okay, to call Mitch McConnell, to tell him to bring H.R. 1 to the Senate floor. Because we can talk about student loan debt, we can talk about the price of prescription drugs, we can talk about the affordability of housing, but as long as we let the special interests in Washington, as long as we let them have a louder voice than each of you, we will not be able to make the progress in this country that we need to make. So we need to know who's funding our elections. We need to know that our elections are secure. We need to know that our democracy is safe. And so I'm asking each of you to please support H.R. 1, to call Mitch McConnell and ask him to bring it to the Senate floor. Thank you so much again for being here. It's an honor